Welcome to Camp Confidential, Beyond the Bars. I'm Katrina McLaren, and with my co-host Cheryl Womack, author, entrepreneur and philanthropist, we tell it like it is. In Season 1, we take you inside the walls of a women's federal prison camp. From pre-sentencing to navigating daily life behind bars, we offer practical advice, survival strategies and insights that no one tells you before you go in. No sugarcoating, no cliches. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only. Be sure to do your own research and consult a professional. Today's episode, Everyone Does the Time, is based off the book How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison by the Cheryl Womack, available now on Amazon. From the outside world, it seems that life still goes on and unchanged, but for those who love you, your incarceration is a journey they experience too. Cheryl, would you say that your family and close friends served their own kind of sentence alongside you?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that they serve it watching you suffer while you're going through the process, have just the absence of having you in their life. I mean, it's not like you're going away for a week's vacation or even a month's vacation. You're going away for a while, and you'll have very limited contact, and they can't pick up the phone and call you and say they have an emergency. They have to wait for you to call them. So it really is a very, very difficult time, and it is just as hard on them. I will tell you, I think I worried so much about how I would get everything prepared for all of them in my absence that I probably did my poorest job of worrying about them and what they were going through.
Well, I suppose in a way you're trying to put everything in its boxes and make sure everything's ready to go. And a part of that was because you're the primary provider, is to line up all the other times of things, the business sides of things, and it's really easy to let the emotional side of things get lost. So that would be the one thing you'd maybe, if you could, you'd go back and change?
Just again, go through the process of writing this book, working with women while I was in prison with their other parts, finally getting to have some one-on-one time to talk to my sons on the limited basis that I did. You realized how much you didn't go over. How do you feel about it? What do you think about what's happening to me? Are you worried about things? There's so many questions I think you would ask them. And again, I think you want to figure out how to ask them from their point of view. How does this affect your life? How's this affecting your friends? It would be by happenstance that I would find out that a friend had said something rudely to my kids, one of their friends, or weren't friends with them anymore, or just made fun of, oh, I hear your mom's going to jail, that kind of stuff. And very hurtful for them. And how do they deal with that? And they didn't tell me. And they didn't tell me because I'd not created the online communication.
And look, the reality is too that it's a hard subject to broach between people. I mean, it's a little bit like, it's like if someone's got an illness. It's hard. People don't know what to say. But I think in this particular circumstance, it's really important to get those lines of communication open. So I can see why you think that would be one thing you'd want to go back and change. Tell me, the first time, what was your reaction, and how did you break the news to your husband and your two sons when you decided to take that plea deal? And, how did you break that to them that this was going to happen?
I don't think I was in constant communication with my oldest son, Andrew. Just sometimes talk to him. I would have lunches with him every couple of weeks. And we would talk about what's going on. We're still fighting it in court, going to trial. And even when I would have hearings and everything, I wouldn't have my kids. I wouldn't have anybody go. The only person would go would be my husband, Dean. And he went to all the trials and he went to all the meetings with me, with the attorneys. And so when my attorney made me come in that weekend before Easter and made me make a deal and would not let me leave her office, then I had my husband sitting there with me. And he was as devastated as I was that we're suddenly listening to somebody who's supposed to be representing me, telling me that we have to say we're guilty and then we're not leaving until we do. And we have to make a deal. And that's all there is to it. And we just watched the whole thing go downhill. And he had arguments with her as an attorney along the way a few times about, where's our side of this whole thing? What documents have we looked at? He was in the thick of everything. And I think Dean's being in the thick of everything helped him get through it all. It didn't help him not be able to win it, and get it where it wanted to be, but he was involved in it, and I think that helped him. My kids just sort of had to hear it randomly. And then, of course, when we finally made the deal, we hoped that if I agreed to pay restitution, I didn't feel like I owed. And if we made a deal, my hopes was that I wouldn't go to prison, that I'd get home, that I'd be put as a home confinement or parole or something, a community service, something else. That's what we're hoping for.
So when you're sitting in that solicitor's office that weekend, is Dean in agreement with you to take the plea deal, or it's the decision's not his, he lets you make that on yourself? How does that come about? Because at least he was with you then at that weekend, you know?
I don't think he ever agreed to it. I think I finally told him I just want it over with. I'm tired. I want it done. It's been 9 years. It's expensive. I mean, one of the reasons for me to make the deal was because I was going into debt against my home and not able to go out and really do anything and create any other businesses or do much of anything else. And so it put me in a position where financially I was starting to have some hardships that could have long-term effects on me and my family because I was our provider.
So a lot of people need to realize too that while you're fighting this for 9 years, and number one, you're not growing your businesses and you're not developing a new streams of income because this is taking up 100% of your time and your finances to fight. So you didn't actually have a formal sit down with either boy to say, hey, this is what I'm going to have to do. And that didn't kind of happen?
I didn't know what I'd have to do. Again, all the way up to going into court, when I agreed to accepting a plea of guilt and being told what my sentencing was, I didn't know until they knew. And of course, of all the days for everybody, your friends, family, everybody to show up, hoping it's going to be good news and they're there to show positive support and everything, that's the day I find out I'm going to jail.
So the first time you find out is standing in a public courtroom in front of a judge that there's actually going to be a sentence here that's going to be beyond what you were hoping to be home detention or something like that.
Bless his heart, he never made me stand. You know how they make you stand up there and get sentenced and talk to you and make you say, he had to stand up to be sweared in when I first got there, and he could see how real upset I was. He let me sit through the whole thing. He actually was pretty kind.
And from your family's point of view, I'm sure that that would have come as probably a really big shock to, I mean, maybe not so much Dean, but certainly the two boys, because they weren't as looped in. So maybe it was a shock.
Well,
I'm assuming.
I don't think whether you're looped in or not. I think even if you thought maybe you could go to jail, you're in shock when you tell somebody you're going to jail and you're going to jail for 18 months. You're in shock. I was in shock. They were worried about me. The other thing is I think there were some who were in shock, and there were those of us who we were mad and in shock. We were mad that it turned out like it did because we really felt like we'd fought a fight that wouldn't go this direction, and it did. So you're dealing with anger, sadness, fear, hurt. I mean, so many emotions. It wasn't even funny, but you're still trying to pull it together because now you've got your whole family right there in front of you.
So obviously you had your family and close friends with you in court that day, and it was an outcome that you yourself weren't even expecting.
Well,
what's racing through your head in those few seconds when you find that out? Are you just in shock? I mean, do you have time?
I don't think anything raced in my head. I think I was in shock, and actually I was worried about my kids. Worried.
How they would take it, or worried them?
You find out you've got 30 days. It's like, oh my God, even though I was planning in case this happens, what do I do? Now you have to get serious. Now, what do I do? And so I just had to get really serious about sitting down and figuring out for each part, what am I going to do with each person and each company and any source of income that I had and any problem that I could still have hanging out there. And, I had rental properties, so I had to make sure what's happening with those kinds of things. And who's going to make sure money's coming in and out of my checking account? I was fighting with the IRS for a civil tax case thing because the federal government wouldn't let me close the civil one while that one was ongoing because they wanted to show a pattern of behavior. So even though I'd had it settled in 2008, closed it when they found out it was there. It made me shut it down. And so that could fall in my lap too. And as a matter of fact, it did. I got served letters when I went into prison from the IRS saying, you owe this much money, a ridiculous amount of money. And I had to get an attorney and go into the offices and literally get on the phone and go, you don't get to send me this letter now that you put me in jail. You just have to sit and wait till I get out.
Well, I mean, how do they think you're going to defend yourself from prison?
Well, that's what I said. I said, now you want to talk about this? I said, we had this completely settled now. So they went away, and there are several things that just, you get treated completely different. You get treated not great when you're a potential felon. When you've made a deal or been found guilty, you're a felon and you're treated differently. You've now got the stamp of bad behavior, whatever, and it changes. And again, that was difficult because I was really well known to the community. So it was really well known, that this was happening to me.
Well, of course, and to this day, everyone thinks you went to prison for tax fraud, which you actually didn't. But everyone still, to this day, because that's the narrative that was painted online through press releases.
And that's the narrative that they sat and got to read in to the judge, because they get to read in, what they're saying the narrative is of what their finding counts for. So they're reading in this tax evasion things, which none of those were pled to. None of those had anything to do with anything we were doing. But that's what they read in. And you just had to sit there and, that was hurtful. That was really hard. And I paid for a tax accountant to be there to verify some losses that I had that should have been able to take against anything they thought I had due, more than enough to take as a credit against them. I kept going, just take it off my tab. I've overpaid taxes so much, I shouldn't have to owe anything. And I brought this guy in who could vouch for the tax credits being viable and real, because I'd sent it to him in advance to do the work. And I paid for him to be there, and we don't call him up. I just felt like it was an inside job. Even my attorney at the end, the last minute attorney, knew the judge. And instead of coming in with me, he came and met the judge first, and then came and met me in the room instead of meeting up with me first. And you just could tell something had happened. The fix was in.
Wow, that's pretty scary. So you're now sort of facing with those 30 days. How do you start to prepare yourself mentally and emotionally before surrendering? Or did you have time to even consider that?
I had 30 days. So, that's what I say. You have to snap out of it. I probably took 24 hours, 48 hours and cried and felt sorry for myself. And then it was time to sit down and say, who can balance my checkbook? Who can get in and check emails that come in for me? Who can, do this part? I had an assistant who'd been with me for 20 plus years, but she couldn't do everything, and so I had to figure out who's going to get power of attorneys to do what things. And my husband could do power of attorney for our farm stuff, but my one son could do it for our business stuff, and how do I make sure their payrolls got paid? And, there was a lot of, how do I take care of me medically? How do I make sure they have everything that they need? You just tried to think of what's everything that could possibly go wrong and go right that you're going to miss out on. While you're there, you have a limited amount of time to talk to people. And the other part is you don't know if the people want to even tell you all the things. So I'm talking about me, and I have people who are giving me open lines of communication. Well, a lot of people may not be told what's going on. They may not find out until their mother's dead or their sister's dead or so-and-so's been in an accident, and they don't tell them until they've completely recovered because you're in jail and they don't want to create any more problems for you, but you want to know. Getting made felon is very much like being diagnosed with a serious cancer. You really want to talk about it, and you really want to talk about your feelings and their feelings and everybody's feelings, but it's such a difficult thing to talk about, especially before you've gone, because it's such an unknown. There's just not good information out there to really know. And I'm telling you, as much as I'm giving you good information on the camp and my experience now, it's still inadequate for when you're going to a larger presence or for somebody who's in there for a longer period of time. I can only give you, the information that I gathered from my friends or learned myself. And so there's still so much more to learn about it.
So did you think your sons or your husband, did anyone have any issues with taking on that responsibility? Because I'm sure from their point of view, there must have been concerns about, well, how do I do this? What do I do? They must have had their own level of concerns as well.
Well, we gave him lists, and I will tell you, I had one friend who I'd invested in his business, and he'd done quite well, and he was practically like an adopted son. And I had asked him if any real serious problems came up, please help Ryan, my youngest son, with these things. And I was pretty upset with him because what I found is when my loan was getting thrown out of the bank, he basically would make appointments with bankers that he knew, have my son dress up and just go deal with it on his own. How horrible. How horrible is that? I felt really badly that my son told me he was mad. He was scared to death. He's sweaty. He went. He says, I sucked it up and I went, Mom, but I was so scared. He goes, I couldn't do what you do. I couldn't do it. And I knew I couldn't do it. Maybe he could have, but he'd never had to try to do those things before. So he certainly wouldn't have had the confidence to even talk about my finances. You want to redo a loan, you got to talk about what kind of money you have, what business you have, what cash flow, what finances. What are your losses carried forward that most bankers don't seem to understand, even though it's a normal routine part of business? So my son didn't understand those things, and I felt completely horrible. I couldn't have known to prepare him for that.
So that's an interesting point, that you did sort of carve out the parts to people that you thought would be the most appropriate to take them, but you can't always rely upon the people to actually see them through. Was that really disappointing to find out, especially with a long-term friendship, that you were so horribly let down?
Well, to this day, that person was a good family friend, and my family doesn't want anything to do with him, and he's not that close a friend to me now.
So it changes. It does.
It changes you a lot, because I really counted on that person providing some emotional support. And they just got words of bullshit. They just didn't get anything that was substantive, face-to-face visits. I'm going to take you to the bank and I'm going to help talk. None of it. Maybe that was maybe that's more than I should have expected from him, but it's what I asked him in case those things came up before I went in. And I would have done that for his wife. I absolutely would have done that for his wife.
I think it's more disappointing, Cheryl, that some people that you think are friends, they get caught up in the stigma. Maybe they didn't want to be involved with that stigma of, you're now a convicted felon. And once again, we go back to that narration that was painted about the tax cheat. People are taking that on board and believing it. Very disappointing because should know better. Do you think while you were in prison, your role as a mother changed?
I think that I had more scheduled instead of casual time with them. I had less scheduled time. I set up, first I would try to make phone calls and make them really quick, but I just couldn't make them very well and have much time left over to talk to Dean and you really have to schedule and make sure you know what your minutes are. You watch countless women go in there and you're so desperate to touch base with family and friends and people to see that they're doing okay or make you feel better about what's going on. That first you watch them calling and not getting through and nobody answering, and that breaks your heart for the person making the phone call. Then you watch where they get through and they talk to people and they talk to them so much that within 3 days they run out of all their minutes and they've got the rest of the month to go with nobody to talk to. They absolutely will have no other conversations with anybody until the new month rolls around. So I really measured that out and managed and said, here's how much time and here's how I'm going to do it. And I might have gone over a minute or two here, a minute or two there, but I really tried to stay there. And once I understood how the chats worked, the phone chats, those were golden because I could see my son's face and look at them for 25 minutes. And like I said, my youngest son's not a big talker, but he would sit and talk and try to have things to talk to me about. And I loved that. You could see it was out of his character, but he put forth every effort and really wanted to be there and be present.
Do you think, though, too, and that before you went to prison and before any of this happened, life was so incredibly busy, you're running from one project to the next, that maybe in the flip side of it, that this forced you and your sons to actually sit down and have those quality exchanges for those 25 minutes that you might not have had prior?
Maybe that improved our relationship. Maybe it didn't. I was thankful to have them. There's no doubt in my mind that not having those conversations would have distanced us dramatically by the time I got out. It was very necessary to have some conversations. And I encourage anybody in any way they can, if you can't do anything else, write letters and pour your heart out because you just have to keep in touch and you have to tell them how you feel. Again, I think what I have realized at this point is it's more important to say, how do you feel?
Yeah. Tell me with your husband, Dean, because a lot of marriages don't survive a partner or a spouse going to prison. People change and they can grow. How did that put a strain on your marriage with Dean, or did it change the dynamic?
From the moment it all started, Dean stepped up to the plate to be my trooper. He was just like my guard. He would investigate everything and look up laws and carry through and do so much research. We had to not talk to him about it because his comfort was in trying to understand what legally can you do, what can't you do, what do you have to support. He was like a paralegal or an attorney in action, learning everything he possibly could about everything. And, for him to feel better, he wanted to talk to you about it. And it was just one more time I had to talk to somebody about it that I just didn't want to do it. And nor did anybody else. And everybody we went out with, every couple, he'd tell them everything he'd learned about everything. And we all lived and breathed this thing, for that whole time frame. So that was daunting, but it helped him live and breathe it. And that's what he did to show me he loved me and to show me he cared and he wanted to be there to support me. And while it made me mad sometimes that it didn't stop, on the other hand, it didn't stop. He never quit supporting me. I worried when I went in that he'd be real steady about coming to see me. And again, he missed 2 weekends out of the entire 15 months. It's amazing to me what a trooper he was. Now, he didn't stay that long when he got there, which always surprised me that you drive for 5 hours, and then you'd be there maybe 3 hours and then you drive for 5 hours. But, he doesn't sit still very well unless he's taking a nap. And so, and it's not fun to be in there either.
So you think actually that it sort of strengthened the bond in a way?
I think it strengthened our bond. I think, we had come out of some really rough times and we were in a real shaky place before this all started. And the girl who had embezzled had definitely gone to some trouble to try to break our marriage up. And there was some fallout and that gave us something to sort of hang on to each other and try to come back together for. So I absolutely think that this scenario, as crazy as it seems, helped our marriage.
How did your relationships with your extended family change, or did they improve?
Well, so one of my extended families, it might not be normal for most people, is my first husband, who I've known since I was 15 years old, and his wife have always stayed friends of mine. And so, I mean, the very night I was indicted, he showed up with a bottle of champagne, and I'm laying on the couch crying, and I don't want to talk about anything. And here he comes with champagne to, say, let's just talk about something else. And, but he just showed up, and Dean's there, and they're all talking, and he was a trooper. And then my sister, Rachel, when I was turning myself in for self-surrender in advance, when I was first indicted, she called me because I didn't have anybody going with me. And she goes, I'm coming in and I'm going with you to go in and self-surrender. You're not going to go by yourself. Then I ended up taking Rachel, my attorney, my sister. So I had a little group that went with me, and it was fine. But I didn't want Dean to go do that one with me because it's hard. They're taking you to jail. They're fingerprinting you, mugshots. You didn't know how long you were going to be there. It was going to be a long day. And he'd lived and breathed a lot of it. So it was nice to give him a break from that one. And it gave me a break too.
So is that before you actually go into prison, you have to go do all that? Or are you talking about the day you actually go in?
Now you have to do that as soon as you're indicted. As soon as you're indicted, the process starts. And they literally put you in jail and you sit in there, and then they bring you out and they thumbprint you and take your picture and do all that stuff. And you go sit back in jail until they tell you that they've said it's okay for you to go and hang around until you come in to your hearing with your judge. A lot of times you see them bring them in chains and shackles, and they're bringing them in to say, you're going to be in jail for longer, no bail for you. And so I have to go for a bail hearing that day after I go through the other process when I'm indicted. And again, the nice thing they did for me is they gave me some time in advance when I could come and check in and come do that. I had to meet with the person that I was going to check in with while I was going through this whole process, and surrender my passport and do all that stuff. And then they let me wander around the building until it was time to go in. You literally could see them bringing people in the side doors who came from the jails who didn't get to go wander around. So I knew I had good fortune with that. And then the guy basically said he'd have me out on my personal recognizance, on my word, and let me go. But he could have said, I want $1 million bail. I want $100 million bail. He could have had anything. So, but he didn't. And I got to come home. So that was done. And then my sister came home with me, and we were all relieved that now we'd start the process of attorneys.
Did that surprise you that you got a phone call from your sister? Because I know you have many siblings. Were there surprises along the way of who reached out to you?
I was, because over the years, I have such a big family, and big families, I guess, can be lovely, but there can be a lot of, there can be a lot of difficulties too. And so I wasn't that close with anybody in my family, but I wasn't real distant with a lot of them. And so this one sister who keeps in touch with everybody in the family reached out to called me and said, I want to come in and I'm going to be there for you. And then even after I went into prison, she was the sister who showed up. I want to say every other weekend she showed up.
Well, that's impressive, I think.
Listen, she just said, there are different times that you do different things for different members of your family, and this is when I need to be here for you. And she was just adamant about it. And I mean, bless her heart, because it gave Dean a break for company. It wasn't just, although I had a few other people come, it was mostly my sister Rachel and Dean who came and saw me steadily.
And what did that mean to you from an emotional point of view?
There's only so much you can talk about when you talk to somebody every weekend, and it's jail. But I mean, we talk about jail, we talk about family, we talk about when we were kids. I love my sister. I appreciate so much what she did. I mean, I think I've just gotten back into all my ways of work and everything else, and we don't see each other that often now, but more often certainly than we did. And she has a very special place in my heart because she reached out and, made her feelings known, and nobody else in my family did.
Did it surprise you for people that you thought would step up who didn't?
No, I guess I didn't have any expectations. And I think when things are hard, you think you're going to do them alone. And I will say I have my own internal fights about whether I want to do things with anybody or whether I want to get through it alone. I mean, it's just how I grew up, and I struggle with somebody else coming in, and then I have to figure out their feelings and my feelings. And, I'm not just managing me now I'm managing them, because I can't have you there. Not, something makes me sad or scares me. You're sad and it scares you. And then I'm worried about that person. Like when I went in and we didn't know I'd have to stay in the jail for a little bit. And, I had to take off all my wedding rings. And they said, well, I don't know if I can let you out. And I think they were just messing with us. But it was upsetting to them. And had they not been there, it would have just been me. So it's hard for me to take somebody with me to do those kinds of things. But I guess, God bless, I have stubborn people in my life that love me, that are adamant that they go. And it was very nice to have them there.
Around all this, we've talked a little bit about the personal side of things and the emotion side of things. Were you shocked a little bit by what happened business-wise? That, your bank's dumping you, you've got all these other ramifications that you probably never foresaw happening.
Well, especially since 4 years had gone by under the indictment, and I'd continued to do all the things that I was doing. So I don't know why they thought when I pled guilty to something that was going to change and anything was going to change on me, nor did they make a phone call to say, what does this mean? In fairness, nor did I make a phone call. I just assumed those things would go on business as usual. And so, like I've advised, you should get in touch with your bankers. You should get in touch with your people that are providing you services and things or schools when these things are happening to you. And I was just too embarrassed and didn't talk to them about it. And I think it would have gone a long way probably if I'd have talked to them, but they didn't try to talk to me either. So it's sort of a two-way street. The communications weren't there. And again, for me, the reason it mattered is I wasn't a little deal for a banking account or for an insurance policy. I mean, I was a very expensive insurance policy or very expensive or big financial accounts, not just small stuff. And so I just expected them to have not necessarily more empathy, but more professionalism. And I didn't find it professional to wait till I got in jail and then pull the trigger.
I don't think anyone would, to be fair. And the ramifications of that, of putting it back on your family, as you said, and your son, to have to try and deal with that. Because remember, you're in prison. You can't deal in business. You can't discuss business.
You cannot. And I mean, it's just, you're sitting there going, it's hard to talk. I mean, the loan I had to do was a personal loan against my home, that I'd taken out to help pay some of the legal bills while I was waiting for other business things to happen. And so the house just has this loan, but the bank's throwing you out, and you have to figure out, where am I going to go get this loan? And again, I think I said in another version of this, the banker who'd been there with me for 20 years as a customer was so mad she quit and went to another bank and went and started pulling the information so that she could help me process. It wasn't easy for her either, because then all these bankers didn't know me either, but she got me moved over to a small but new bank.
Which you're still with today, is that correct?
Which I'm still with today. I won't leave her. So, I mean, talk about that. I mean, there's gratitude. I mean, you're forever thankful. And that's what my son said, whoever banks us, that's where I'm going. I don't care who it is or where it is. I'll stay with them forever. And so my son's the very same way.
Do you find that with this, having now you're an incarcerated prisoner, did you find that people's attitudes towards you changed from the business world?
I had some pretty impressive friends that had some pretty big businesses in the community and that were friends of mine. And I heard through grapevines on more than one occasion that somebody might start to talk about me in front of them, and this friend would go, "She's my friend," and shut them up.
I'm sure it would have been a topic of hot gossip around Kansas City, I'm sure.
I'm sure it got talked about lots. But if it got talked about around my true friends, they were pretty much told to shut up. So, I mean, I know I had that kind of stuff. And this one friend I was texting with, he wasn't healthy, and I was texting him. We were talking all the time anyway. He didn't tell me that he was standing up for me, but I was not surprised when several other business people said, "By the way, I want you to know that when this came up." And also, you have to, when you get sentenced to prison, before you go to prison, you ask for letters to suggest a lesser sentence from all your friends to speak to your character and community service and all these different things. Well, I had 165 letters. I had letters from Coach Bill Self at KU. I had letters from top 100 Fortune 100 companies. I had governors. I had very impressive letters that came, 165 letters. They'd never had that many come in. And it still didn't help. I mean, when I got to read them, when they gave them back to me, when I got to read them during that 30 days, I felt like I was going through my own funeral, because it's like you're reading all these wonderful things people say about you. You just sit there and blubber and cry and go,
so you actually went through and read all of them.
I did. I mean, you're sitting there going, let's see what this person said when they sent them. That was a tearjerker. That just broke your heart. Because, they're just saying great stuff that you don't say to that person, or you might say it, but you might be drunk, or you might say it, you don't say it quite the same way, and they were just really not, I mean, when I got out of jail, the first person to call me on the phone was Coach Bill Self.
I'm sure that you kept all the letters, right? Have you still got them today?
Yes, I absolutely kept the letters.
Did you find the visitations themselves actually quite a painful process, or were you just kind of just relieved to see like Dean or your sister?
Every first visit with somebody was extremely painful. I mean, you're embarrassed, you're hurt, you're sad, and so every time someone new came in, when Wally and Sherry first came, when my son Andrew came, when Ryan came, with every one of them, I blubbered all over the place, was just so happy to see them. And at the same time, embarrassed that they had to go through what they had to go through to get in, just that they had to come so far, they had to be so put out. They're happy to be there. I had one business partner I did business with up here near Maryville, Missouri, where I am now, and she was adamant to come and see me as a business partner. And I mean, she was so sweet. She just came in and just said, "You're the bravest woman I know, and you're so successful, just nothing but great things." So you're humbled, but at the same time, it's exhausting. I mean, it's hard. What you're trying to do is be stable, as emotionally stable as you can be. And every time you have a different visitor or something that's out of the ordinary happen to you there, you're destabilized. You're more emotional. And so those visits were hard. Now, for people who don't have visitors, and hardly ever have them, I mean, they go up there as soon as the place opens up in the morning, they don't come out till 3 o'clock. And, they don't have visitors. I mean, you feel so sad for them and so sorry for them. Even if you see, I mean, if I saw Dean once a month, he wouldn't get out of there in 3 hours. I mean, I'd be sitting there trying to hold on to his hand or just be there with him as much as I could be, or the same with my kids. When they were there, they had my undivided attention. I was so excited to see them and have time and figure out, what are you doing right now? And how are you holding up?
In the past that you actually found it quite difficult if you were phoning Dean and for example, and he had people over for dinner and he wanted to put them on the phone to you and that you found uncomfortable. Explain why.
Well, even more than that, before I even went in, I said, don't ever call me when you're having somebody over for dinner, because Dean loves to cook for people. It's how he shows he cares about people. He just cooks with his heart and feeds everybody. And so he would have every now and then would have some friends come over and cook for him and visit, and they'd all want to know how I'm doing. And it might be when I'm calling. And I just said, do not tell me you're having people over there, because I didn't want to feel left out. I didn't want to remember I'm away from everybody. It was just too painful. And one time I called in for dinner, and, he's yelling out to him, "It's Cheryl," and they're all yelling from the background. And I just slammed the phone down and got off the phone. I told you, don't do this. And I mean, don't do this. It is too hard for me to deal with. I'm not there. I'm here. And I can't do it. Now, maybe other people could do it and they go, "Hey, that was not okay with me. I was in a different world and was pulled out of it. And I wasn't going to pretend that, it was okay for me to say, hey, from here." It hurt.
That was your reaction, was not to, honestly, in some ways, have to deal with that. You would choose and pick the parts that you would play and actively be involved in for your own self-preservation?
For my own emotional stability, and for me to just figure out how to get through this. You literally just, at first especially, just took it a day at a time. You didn't think about how many months you had. You didn't think about anything else going on. You thought about, this is what I'm doing today, and that's all I'm thinking about. And you didn't go into the future, and that way you didn't have to, think about things that could be upsetting to you that you might be missing.
Did you experience any difficulties as far as while you're in prison, because you can't discuss business, but at the end of the day, things do crop up? Did you just have to hand over complete control of everything business-wise to your family and certain key members?
Now, I'm not going to tell you that Dean didn't tell me when he visited me, maybe something was going on or somebody might have a basic question for me to answer or something. But you couldn't do it through emails. You couldn't do it through the phones, but he might just ask me a question and say, "Rachel needs to know, what do you want to do about this?" Or "Ryan is having a problem with this. What do you want to do?" And those are the things he might tell me, like, "The bank is throwing us out. You need to figure out who to talk to." Yay. And so suddenly you're trying to figure out, okay, I've got to figure out. And for those kinds of things, you often can get the counselor to go in, and you go into his office and maybe make a phone call. But I could never connect with this counselor. And I never, I would finally have to figure out how to get up to the front and talk to a guard and figure out and say, "I'm going to call my attorney." And you could go up front, and I would go to the office, and then they kept walking into the office like, "Are you still on the phone?" Well, maybe I was on the phone 15 minutes, but I didn't do it if it wasn't essential. And it just happened a couple of times.
So that's an interesting point, because we've never really delved into the counsellor side of things in prison. So you obviously have access to a counsellor. How often are you able to go? Or can you go upon request, or how does that work?
He's supposed to be there every day, all day. And he's supposed to be, contacting you And when he comes in, he's just swarmed by everybody. And this particular counselor we had at our camp would get in trouble, and he'd get thrown off while whatever happened was being investigated for 6 weeks, 3 months, something like that at a time. And we were counselorless. We just didn't have one. And so for a lot of my time in there, I didn't have an active counselor, and nobody else was going to pick it up. Literally, the counselor on the other side told me that he had files that came up half her height to be looked at and reviewed for what paperwork and things that need to be done on them to keep these files current. And she wasn't going to do them. So he's just behind. And then the other part is, I told you, this guy, all he could talk to me about is, did my husband want to sell his truck? I couldn't get him to take me seriously, even though sometimes I had to talk to him running Big Sisters about Big Sister stuff. But he pretty much brushed me off even for that stuff.
So you didn't really feel that you had that you didn't have adequate levels of counselling, or that it was even really available to you while you were in there during your time?
There's no counseling or case management going on. They do what they want to do for their parts minimally, and that's what they do. I mean, they're really, I don't know why you have a counselor there, because they have to eventually do some of their paperwork. They have to get the people on the list. I mean, those are the people with those stacks this high of people writing in to have people come and see them. Well, they've got to see if they've been a felon or not and approve them to come in. It just takes a long time for them to do that. But they also have to answer questions for girls, talk about the problems, talk about their banking issues, and family issues, get permission if they've had somebody for a funeral or a death in the family or an illness. All those things come up for him to talk about. But he was probably gone a third of the time that I was there, just off campus. And the other third of the time, he was swarmed on by so many people, and he just couldn't be bothered. And the case manager was worse than him. He always sat up front in the mailroom with the CO up there and gabbed and talked and carried on, and would only come down when he had to sit and meet with the girls and give them their paper, what they're going to do or review them. And he really was barely there too.
As an entrepreneur and a businesswoman, what advice would you give to someone like yourself who is a successful business person who's potentially facing time? What advice would you give them as far as getting their business affairs in order before they go in?
I mean, you better figure out how to get somebody to manage as much of this as you can, because your time will be extremely limited. Whether you can get up to a guard or a warden or somebody and make a couple phone calls, they do not want you doing business while you're there, period. So you need to make sure you've got the proper power of attorneys in place, and then you hope for the best. You hope they don't steal your business from you, ruin your business while you're gone. You're at their mercy. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to come home to. I thought they could all do an okay job. I tried to make my stuff be as automatic pilot as it could be, but cash flow wasn't completely steady. So you'd have to look for certain things to happen. And it was just a tricky time.
This journey all completely started because someone embezzled from you and stole from you. Was that a concern for you when you're having to hand over? I mean, you've got control back of everything. Then you have to go back, you have to go into prison. So you're giving up control again. I would have thought that would have been a very scary prospect for someone that had faced that level of betrayal and embezzlement.
Well, I showed my son what numbers to watch and how I managed him to watch them to get the balances and everything from the gal who handled our books. And he proceeded to do that. And he was very careful about doing that, I'm sure. So, I mean, I did not think that my business would fail, the limited business that we had. I didn't think it would grow. And if there were a problem, I worried about who and how could they handle it if there were a real problem. But the small problems, my assistant was pretty good about stepping up and figuring out how to do things and be resourceful. My son ended up being my husband was resourceful for things that he had to handle through the farm businesses. And so, I really didn't worry about losing any more money. And there wasn't tons of them for them to get at that time. I'm in debt. They were not going to take a whole lot from me either way at that point.
So the one thing you did mention in the book, you talk about that, it was important to establish, you think, some kind of safe word, that it gave your family a sense of comfort. And did you believe that gave you a sense of comfort going in as well?
I do. I believe knowing that I had just a word I could say. I have one deceased sister out of 10 brothers and sisters, and we decided to pick her name. And so we just said, if I say Maria to you on the phone or when you come in person or whatever you do, you need to know there's a serious problem and I can't share it with you. And you've got to figure out how to get to the bottom of it. That I'm afraid. I'm truly afraid of what's happening. And I didn't know how I would tell them that, but we established early on that we would have that. And I think a great comfort to all of us was that never came up. that's a real comforting thing to know, that you just don't have to say that. So it's not saying bad things didn't happen or sad things didn't happen. And sometimes I didn't get on the phone blubbering and calling about something that upset me, that was going on. But nothing happened that would cause me to say, you need to come in here and find out what's going on. I'm afraid for myself.
In the time that you were in prison, because it was still 15 months in total out of 18, what was your biggest surprise when you actually got out and you'd said the world had moved on? What was the biggest thing that surprised you?
Well, I think the biggest thing that surprised me was you come out and this has been your life experience. It's what you've talked about and lived and breathed the most. And I don't know that you think you want to talk about it, but it's what you know to talk about, because it's what you've done for 15 months. It'd be like if you were on a vacation for 15 months and came in and everybody said, no, we don't want you to talk about it. It's in the past. Well, that's how, when you get out of prison, for me, everybody's like, it's in the past. It's over now. It's over. You just need to put it behind you. And I didn't want to put it behind me. I mean, I felt like I didn't go in there just to grasp all this information and not do something with this. I'm not. And they just thought I was crazy. Batshit crazy. They did not want me to go any further, do anything. They wanted me to bury this thing, put it to bed, and just move on. And I said, I can't. I feel like I went in there for a reason. I felt like part of this is my reason for it. I can't. I said, I have to do something with this. And I don't know to this day that they're necessarily still in agreement with me on it, but they respect the fact that I'm doing it.
Thank you for listening to How to Go to Camp with Katrina McLaren and Cheryl Womack. For more support, check out the Women of Worth website, www.womenofworth.wow.org, where you'll find helpful resources, including Cheryl's books, Mummy Loves You Everywhere and How to Go to Camp, Surviving in a Women's Federal Prison. Whether you're preparing for the journey or supporting someone through it, remember, there's guidance, hope, and a community ready to help you navigate this path.